people on YouTube who have made top 10 worst video game cliches lists. Now it's my turn. Except this will be a top 15. For those of you who were unlucky enough to see my original list, which I made 3 years ago, this video will hopefully be much better. Here's the restriction. They have to mostly happen in video games, so cliches like brooding and boys that look like girls will not be on here. And here's one thing you should keep in mind throughout the entire video. Before you say, there's supposed to be a test of skill. It's like Josh Scorcher said in his worst Kingdom Hearts bosses list. There's supposed to be a test of skill, not a test of patience. And just hear me out. I'm about to say one of the most controversial things I will ever say in my life, but I don't hate escort missions. Yeah, I said it. Maybe it's because I haven't played the more annoying escort missions like in Resident Evil or Earthworm Jim, but I don't hate them. Let's go. Games can get a bit repetitive if the same formula is used throughout the whole game. So games try to hold you over by using some cool gimmicks like transforming, riding in vehicles or on animals, and then we have robot suits. A lot of people think that robots are epic, but in video games, they can be so boring. Let's see. Stiff controls? Check. Incredibly slow movement? Check. Hindering your jumping abilities? Check. Lack of fun? Check. Honestly, what's on the game developers' minds when they have these? One example is in Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex. Believe it or not, that's actually one of the more fun times. Well, the straight hallways are tolerable. Even so, jumping straight up feels awkward. There are actually platforming segments and a chase scene with this. Doesn't work very well with the slow movement and bad platforming. The stilts from Yoshi's Island DS might not necessarily be robot suit segments, but they're essentially the same thing. And you know about Sonic Adventure 2? Even people who regard it as the best Sonic game ever can admit that the Tails and Eggman levels are extremely boring, with almost all the characteristics I just stated, especially compared to how fun Tails' gameplay was in the original Sonic Adventure. Well, at least Tails' segments are better than Eggman's segments, but this is why I like the original Sonic Adventure better. I'm no nostalgia fanboy, but I love it when new games are created to bring back nostalgic memories, as long as they don't use the same formula over and over again. Some games nowadays have a tendency to constantly reuse elements from games. Some games even use the same music throughout the franchise, particularly 358 over 2 Days in Recoded, especially with the song Vim and Vigor, which takes the cake for the most overused song in the series because it plays in almost every boss fight in those games. Some games even resort to rehashing the same final boss without the charm. The new Super Mario Bros. Games are infamous for their constantly reusing elements. While I enjoy them, it makes them seem lazy how they barely have any innovation and how they keep reusing the same songs. In my mind, the worst example by far is New Super Luigi U. I haven't played the game, but why should I? It's almost literally the exact same game. Just take New Super Mario Bros. U, rearrange the level layouts, give Luigi the spotlight, lower the time limits, replace Mario with Nabbit, make Nabbit invincible and broken, and voila! You got yourself New Super Luigi U. Okay, seriously, I've seen ROM hacks with bigger differences. Why is it that when Super Mario Galaxy 2 has a little innovation, it gets bashed on, but when New Super Luigi U has no innovation, it's an instant classic? Because it stars Luigi, and he's the best Mario character. Luigi may be cool, but this game has no reason to exist. If it were downloadable content, I would forgive it, but nope, it's its own individual game. The following entry will contain spoilers. You have been warned. Final bosses are a big part of the game. They should be the main villain of the game, but sometimes they throw in a random final boss that they don't have time to pump you up for. One instance is in Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days, where after you defeat Xion, you go back to the world that never was and you battle Riku, who is the final boss, even though by this time, you know that Riku is not the bad guy. And then we have Yoshi's New Island's final boss. After you defeat Baby Bowser, the main antagonist of the game, you face future Bowser who managed to warp through space and time for unexplained reasons. And the fight with him is terrible. Well, at least it's not as bad as the fake-out final boss. But I'll get to that in a later countdown. In Metroid Fusion, even though the SAX is the main villain of the game, the final boss was Omega Metroid, which apparently escaped from the confinement except it popped out of nowhere. In Kingdom Hearts Recoded, even though Anti-Sora was responsible for creating all of the bug blocks that infected the other worlds, he's not the final boss. After him, you continue on and battle the hooded figure, which turns out to be the final boss, who had no involvement in the game other than appearing in some of the most pointless cutscenes in the series. So, who is the hooded figure? While the game still tries to hide who he is, they still give obvious hints of his true identity, which makes it seem like the game developers think their audience has no brain cells. Racing games are awesome, and they would have been even more fun if it weren't for one of racing games' biggest cliches, rubber band AI. For those of you who don't know by now, it's where the computerized players' skill levels depend on what position they are. The one in first place starts to slow down, and the ones in last place start to act like racing experts. Thanks to this, sometimes when you win, it'll sometimes be only because the one in first place felt sorry for you, or sometimes if you lose, it feels like it's only because the opponents kept ganging on you. With the items, it also is irritating. They pretty much reward you for being in last place by giving you the best items. This is why a lot of people play bad on purpose, just so they can get the best items. Having the items depend on your position is okay with offensive items. I mean, what would the one in first place want with an item that knocks out opponents in first place? Other than that, it's dumb. Minigames can be a pretty addicting part of the game, but at certain times, the minigames involve you having to do rapid input sequences for long periods of time. If it's only for a few seconds, I can let it slide. But if it's for any longer than a few seconds, it'll bring great pain to your wrist. One of the worst times is the carrot minigame of Bowser's Inside Story, where you must constantly tap the screen to grind down the carrots while it makes the most annoying sound. Yes, there's an enzyme that you can tap to make it easier, but even with it, your wrist will ache after it. Some Mario Party games also have a habit of doing this. The worst types of rapid input sequences are in the DS games where you have to blow very hard into the mic. Your lungs will be exhausted by then. And by that, I mean more quickly than having to constantly tap the button. Alright, it looks like we're gonna fight Frollo after all. I am so pumped up for this. What's going on? Oh, you gotta be kidding me! We don't get to fight him? Do we at least get to fight him in Sora's story? No? Don't you love how video games tease you by making you think you're going to fight someone, but you don't get to and instead you fight something that came straight out of nowhere? This is a common recurring problem with some of the Kingdom Hearts games. Like in Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, where the game tells you to go after the Wicked Queen in the Snow White world, but you end up fighting the mirror instead. I know what you're thinking. Well, she wouldn't be able to do anything. Well, in the movie, she tried to crush the dwarf with a boulder, so why not have that be one of her attacks? After all, they made Clayton a boss, and all he had was a gun, so why not? The game also built up to a fight with Lady Tremaine and the stepsisters, only for them to be killed by the cursed coach. I know they wouldn't have been able to do much to defend themselves, but if you're not going to be able to fight them, don't make it look like you'll fight them. And the worst of them all is what I just brought up. They pretty much teased you into thinking that Frollo would be a boss, but how does he die? When his giant monster Wargirl flies in, the momentum happens to blow Frollo off the cathedral. That's stupid! At least with Lady Tremaine and the stepsisters, it would have been somewhat excusable if they didn't promise we'd fight them, but Frollo managed to use a sword and control fire. So why can't we fight him? And yes, I have examples outside of Kingdom Hearts. This also happens in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Ganondorf is one of the biggest villains in the game, but you never actually get to fight him. Oh, but you can fight his clone. That doesn't count. I want to fight the real Ganondorf in the Subspace Emissary. Also, Dorman from Shadow of the Colossus. What kind of game doesn't let you fight the main villain? It makes sense that Wander is being possessed by him, and he isn't revealed to be the villain until the end of the game, but come on! In Pokemon Platinum, Caitlyn is the owner of the Battle Castle, and instead of her, you fight Darach, the servant. The reason you can't fight Caitlyn is because she has uncontrollable powers, so if you beat her, she'll get so uncontrollably upset that the entire world could be destroyed. Question, why can't they at least tell us that, or at the very least, give us some hints of it instead of just leaving it at, she isn't in the mood to lose? Because Darach isn't allowed to disclose it. Will you kindly tell us why? You may get to fight her in black and white as one of the Elite Four members because she got rested up, and they finally reveal why she couldn't battle you. Too bad it took 2 years for them to tell us that. In Kid Icarus Uprising in Chapter 8, I can let it slide because that was done on purpose to poke fun at those old cliches. And I wasn't pumped to fight the captain anyways. But otherwise, it's inexcusable and lets you at least get to fight the original boss later in the game. We know about those games that are pretty much unplayable. You know, the ones that are poorly designed with the horrible controls. While I am annoyed with this and it pretty much ruins the game, I can see what was done on accident. But when they interfere with the game on purpose, that's where I draw the line. Another reason I hated Shadow of the Colossus was because of the terrible horseback controls. It's so hard to get aggro to move. Apparently, they did that on purpose to make it feel like you're riding an actual horse. That's not an excuse. There's also Jasper Buttface Jr., who I haven't faced, but they made him terrible on purpose to give you the feeling that violence isn't satisfying, even though that's the whole concept of No More Heroes. Like Tyven and 10 Gamer said, they're advertising a game in the beat-em-up genre and making you feel terrible for playing it. And in one of the Angry Video Game Nerd's recent reviews, he reviewed some old game called Desert Bus, a game where literally the entire game is just driving a bus through the desert for hours to get to Las Vegas with nothing to it, because people felt that games were too violent for people. Well, who buys video games just for bus stimulation? In Earthbound, they make it so that if Ness doesn't call his mother on a regular basis, he will get too homesick to attack. It's like in Shadow of the Colossus. Tampering with the gameplay on purpose to make it feel realistic is not an excuse. In my mind, the worst in the game I've actually played is in Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. A game that I admittedly love, but in this game, it is sometimes where they purposely hinder the gameplay in order to make a joke. In one cutscene, you have to mash the button to sit through the box saying, "I love you," 100 times. And the worst of it is when you have to wake up General White and the game makes you keep jumping on him several times, when most people would think that that's not what the game wants them to do by the 3rd time you jump on him. Seriously, this is supposed to be funny? Well, newsflash. If a joke interferes with the gameplay, then it's not funny. I didn't mind the fetch quest, except for this part. The only thing that keeps it from being much higher is because I haven't encountered as many instances like this as in some of the later entries on the list. Even so, I don't care if it's supposed to feel realistic. I don't care if they're trying to make a joke. I don't care if they're going for a moral. Interfering with the gameplay on purpose is a big no-no unless it tests your skill or if it's a section that was done easy on purpose. It's passable if it doesn't annoy the gameplay too much, though. Video games are intended to be based off your skill and make it feel like if you lost, it's because you didn't do good enough. In this case, it doesn't matter if you're a master at the game or not. You will still lose sometimes because of luck-based events. Luck-based events are okay, as long as they don't make a huge difference. There are a few Mario Party games that I played that have this cliche, such as Cheap Chance from Mario Party DS or Bowser's Big Blast from Mario Party 2. I don't get what people love about Bowser's Big Blast so much. I respect their opinion, but I still don't get what's so great about it. I haven't unlocked the Eternal Star yet. I've seen gameplay footage of it, and I've seen that getting stars depends on what number you roll. The main method of getting stars here is to get them from Bowser Jr., but that only works if you roll a higher number than him, and if he gets a higher number, he will take one from you. Because of this, it can be very possible that someone who's a master at Mario Party can lose easily to a toddler. I love the Pokemon series, but there are some luck-based events, like the Safari Zone. I like the fact you can get a bunch of new Pokemon in it, but you can't bring your own Pokemon into it, and you're stuck with the pathetically weak Safari Balls. And the rarer the Pokemon is, the harder it is to capture them, and the more likely it is for them to run away. Wow, that was fun playing through Super Metroid. I think I might go back to the rest of the overworld to get some of the collectibles. What? I can't get through. Does this mean I have to start the whole game all over again if I want to get everything? Why didn't they tell me that I'd be locked in Turin? This is actually a tie between blocking off areas and trapping you in areas, which are two very similar cliches. Sometimes if you realize you forgot something that will help you a lot and go back to where you need to get it, you'll realize the area is blocked off. It's also a shame on those levels that are unbelievably fun. In Kingdom Hearts, if you want to get all of the Trinity marks, when you get one in Oogie's manual, you have to get one of them before you defeat Oogie Boogie because his manual will be destroyed after you defeat him. It's not that bad if you got the Trinity mark, but if you didn't, it'll be annoying. In Star Fox Adventures, after you return all the spell stones and say goodbye to Tricky, General Pepper will lock your coordinates of the main overworld onto the Krazoa Palace so that you can no longer access the rest of the world. Couldn't they have told us that before? The Fire Emblem series are synonymous with this cliche. In most of the games in the series, you can't go back and train after you beat each chapter, which doesn't mix well with the fact that if a character dies, it doesn't matter how many foes you took down to give them countless experience. If they die, you can't use them anymore, and all that experience will be in vain, since you can't go back and get more experience. Good thing Sacred Stones thought of this by letting you go back to some of the areas on the map to level grind. When a game is cinematic, it's going to have cutscenes in it, and some epic cutscenes at that. But then we have cutscenes that we're forced to watch over and over and over again every time we die. We already know what's happening, so do we really need to watch the cutscene again? Some cutscenes aren't too bad the first time you see them, but after dying repeatedly to the same boss, the cutscene starts to get incredibly idiotic. Even when it doesn't involve a boss, or even dying, this can still happen. Rosalina's backstory from Mario Galaxy was an interesting touch, but it wouldn't hurt for them to be able to choose if you wanted to hear it or not, rather than just making you hear it every time you accidentally run into the library, let alone hearing the next chapter right after the previous one ends, since you unlock chapters throughout the game. A huge example of this is in Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. I may love the cutscenes leading up to the final boss, even I can't deny that they shouldn't have made you sit through them every time you die to the Shadow Queen. The cutscenes take about 5 minutes each. Painful, isn't it? And in Sonic Unleashed, wanna know what I didn't like about the final boss? Aside from him being broken as all heck since the rings never show up when you need them, if you want to face him again, the game makes you sit through some unskippable cutscenes that already took forever. This is another reason why I thought Twilight Princess was my favorite Zelda game. Because you can skip cutscenes in it. I feel like I neglected to mention two primary reasons why Generations 1 and 2 were my least favorite generations. Because the people there are so stupid! Whether it be because they have no brains or because they do idiotic stuff that interfere with the gameplay. For example, some random trainer coming up to you and saying he likes shorts, another trainer coming up to you and randomly saying that her boyfriend is cool, a pair of brats taking one look at you and accusing you of calling them babies, which makes it seem like Game Freak portrays you as a selfish jerk, a fat kid blocking off the Mahogany Town gym for no reason, some greedy old fart not letting you go to Route 44 so you can sell your Rage candy bars, still not letting you pass even after you buy one, and even worse, a security guard not letting you go to Saffron City just because he's thirsty. If you haven't played Pokemon, you have no idea how many times I keep missing from trying to hit the opponents when they're spamming moves that keep you from hitting them. And yes, this is prominent even outside of Pokemon. There are so many stupid moments in Kingdom Hearts 2 that I just can't let by. Sora's on Santa's naughty list for telling everyone he doesn't believe in Santa Claus 7 years ago. Maleficent was resurrected just because the fairies remembered who she was. As for this stupid AI, anyone play the original Star Fox? Even though your allies should be assisting you, they chicken out when the boss appears. Whatever happened to friends stay together? Possibly the most insulting example of this is when some Pikmin throw themselves into dangerous scenarios, including when some non-blue Pikmin run into water, allowing themselves to drown. If some of you noticed, I've been talking about things that are more likely to test your patience than to challenge you throughout this countdown. So why do we have cheap enemy advantages? In case you don't know what I'm talking about, then I'll give you some examples. In the Pokemon series, some moves have a chance of having side effects like making the foe flinch or paralyzing the opponent. Why do they have a greater chance of working on you than working on the opponent? Whoever came up with this idea is out of their mind. This is also a recurring problem in multiplayer games like the Smash Brothers games. There are some assist trophies that serve no purpose but to block the screen so that controlled players can see what's going on, The computerized players are unaffected since they don't have anyone watching the screen. The worst one by far is the Nintendogs. Not only does it block the screen, but a lot of people are going to hit whatever dog they see in real life because of this thing. I feel very bad for dogs everywhere. Now tell me, Sakurai, why are you bringing him back in the next Smash Brothers? Do you want people to hate dogs? And you guys remember the cloaking device from Melee? This item made whoever grabs it turn invisible. If it's used by a human player against CPU players, it'll benefit the opponents instead of you, because you'll need to stare in an eye-aching way at the screen to see who your character is. Your opponents will be able to see you easily. When a computer player is invisible, they will be able to perfectly see themselves. In other words, it benefits your enemies more than it benefits you. When they took this item out in Brawl, they did the right thing. I don't hate Slippy because of his role in Star Fox 64. I hate him because of his role in Slippy's invention event, where you have to pit against both Fox and Falco, and they're both invisible. Alright, you just finished Chapter 5 in Paper Mario. You defeated Lava Piranha, you escaped Mount Lava Lava, and you found the 5th Star Spirit. Are you ready for Chapter 6? Well, too bad! Because now you must go back to the rest of the overworld to get magic seeds. Like, how is any gamer supposed to know that something that looked completely optional would be required to beating the game? I can understand if they're telling you to go back to a new area that wasn't previously accessible. If they tell you where to find them, maybe. It depends on how fun it is. Otherwise, it almost completely ruins the dramatic build-up. Try for Star Fetch Quest, anyone? I can see if it's required to get enough Power Stars, Shines, Jiggies, whatever game you're playing to enter a certain level, because that's kind of the premise of the game, but other times, it's just an excuse to go back and revisit levels. Isn't that for, I don't know, spare time? In Donkey Kong 64, after you get through Hideout Helm and stop the Kremlings from destroying the island, you need the Nintendo coin and Railroad coin before you face King K. Rool. How is any kid supposed to know that you need to find arcade games in the game in order to get them? Let alone where you're supposed to find them. Did I mention you also need all the crowns? Metroid Prime is also guilty of this. And I don't just mean the first one. I mean all 3 of them. And probably the 4th one if the rumors are true about a 4th one being made. In the first game, you need to collect all the Chozo artifacts to get to Impact Crater. In Echoes, it requires you to get all 9 Sky Temple keys to get into the Sky Temple. In Corruption, you have to get all the power cells to power the Valhalla. They're not scattered in one area in particular. They're scattered around the entire overworld. They don't even hint of where they're hidden. Then they honestly think this was a good idea? So as a result, you'll likely wander around an area looking for them, not knowing you found them all in a certain area, or think you got all the collectibles in one area only to find out you missed one. This cliche is the biggest reason why I hate the game Sonic Chaos, because the only way you can beat the game properly is to get all the Chaos Emeralds, hence the name. So if you skipped over just one, you're forced to start the entire game all over again. And aside from getting the emeralds, the game's not even hard. It doesn't even have fake difficulty in it. It's just annoying and tedious. In Sonic Advance 3, not only do you have to get the 7 Chaos Emeralds in order to reach the true final boss, but there are 3 steps to getting them. First, you need to get 10 Chao that are scattered throughout acts in each zone, which is as easy as navigating the original Metroid's overworld thanks to the overexpansive levels. Then you must collect a key that is hidden on a random point within the levels, and then beat it to keep the key. Finally, you have to beat an absurd mini-game where you have to get enough rings in a flight section that has turning controls as good as the original Super Mario Kart. And when you lose, keep in mind I said when, not if, you have to get another key before you can even get a chance to challenge the mini-game again. You get the feeling where you've gotten a really hard item to get in an adventure game and then all of a sudden you die and it erases the progress you got about since then? Yeah, that's inexcusable. This cliche has nothing to do with challenge whatsoever. How exactly is this a challenge? What's so challenging about making you overcome the same thing you already conquered? I can kind of understand in platforming games, well, for the most part, because that's kind of their thing. But in adventuring games and RPG games, it's unacceptable. I really don't get why they support this. It's just stupid and monotonous. If you're trying to grind levels for a boss that's a huge difficulty spike, all that grinding will go away. In my mind, the worst example of this by far is from the original Crash Bandicoot. Remember about a fraction of a minute ago when I said that I can excuse platforming games for this for the most part? This is one of those exceptions. There's only one way to save the game. You get all the talent tokens in a level and enter a bonus section where you can save. What kind of consecutive level game have you only able to save in the middle of a level? And even then, if you die, you miss your chance. Yes, you can get gems to help save. They register your gems, but they don't let you save the levels that you've beaten because of how atrocious the save system is. I now officially feel better that I didn't grow up with this game. But what could be worse than this? Only one more to suffer through. Let's make a quick recap. Number 15, robot suit segments. Number 14, constantly reusing the same elements. Number 13, random final bosses. Number 12, rubber band AI. Number 11, number 10, come on, why don't we get to face him? Number 9, purposely hindering the gameplay. Number 8, luck-based events. Number 7, blocking off areas and or trapping you in them. Number 6, unskippable cutscenes. Number 5, stupidity. Number 4, cheap enemy advantages. Number 3, having to go back to the rest of the overworld to get collectibles. Number 2, how to not make a challenge. How could anything possibly be worse than losing progress whenever you get game over? Well, not much. Just what I find to be the worst cliche in gaming history. Dark levels! Why? Why do these levels exist? They're the most abominable cliche in any game I've ever played. There's no excuse for them. In side-scrollers, I guess they're not too bad. In open-world games, they'll give you some huge pains, especially in games where you don't have maps. This is only excusable where you can light up areas. In the Metroid Prime games, sometimes they like to mix darkness with water physics to add more and more annoyance. In Ocarina of Time, when it gets dark, not only does the awesome music stop, but because of how many hills there are in Hyrule Field, it's so hard to see everything. Even worse when you're trying to retrieve the ocarina from the bottom of the river, because the river is pitch black. The bottom floors of Hollow Bastion in the original Kingdom Hearts are also guilty of this, since not only is it extremely pitch black, but you keep running against walls. And I wouldn't mind this if it were for a fact that it's hard to tell if you're running in a straight line or running against a wall. Oh, you think that's bad? Try doing some platforming segments in the dark. Who in the right mind thought this was a good idea? I am Meta57 II, and dark levels are what I find to be the worst video game cliche ever.
No! Not into the pit! It burns!